Hey guys, so quickly, I just want to give you guys a tier list of which characters I think will be really good to pick up from the Epic Dash Pass. And like starting off, we have Fene, who is an amazing PvE character. She helps with expeditions, she helps with hunts, and she's going to help with the constellation battles, the new content that's been given out, the Trial of Constellations, and she's just going to even be usable in PvP as a counter to some injury units. So I think she's one of the biggest pickups you can get within this RGB selectors. Mort's the only character that fully counters counterattacks, and he's always going to be usable in PvP. He's one of the best Guild War like defense units as well as offense units in certain comps. And in RTA, he's able to deal with the likes of Ayufine. You have sometimes it's really good into the rare Navy Captain Landy picks and the Mickey. Politis, she is one of the only units with Ayufine that cuts CR push, so she's always going to be a good pickup. And she has multiple builds, so getting multiple of her isn't bad. Janua, we know how strong Janua is when pen resistance isn't in the game, and he can combo well if you have ML Poly, Sea Phantom Politis, uh, allowing him to start ramping up before he gets procced and to take out teams. Really strong in Guild War, can be used in Arena, and even decent in PvE content if you don't really want to build PvE units and you just want to do the bare minimum. And then Celine, really strong unit to counter non-attack skill spammers, and she's just really nice to have because there's not really many units that do her role. And she has built-in stealth, which lets her be able to like kind of draft check players in lower brackets of play. So using her in RTA and Arena will be a big bonus for when you're like playing against uh, not that strong, but like middle tier, I'd say, like players where they're more picking units that aren't optimal towards a strong draft. Now, there is a PvP tier, but this is kind of more like nicher PvP, where these units will see play, but they don't really see play outside of maybe RTA and maybe Guild War, maybe Arena. Like basically almost no PvE usage. And starting off the list, we have Valencia, who was really strong in Harsetti games when paired with Young Senya, but Young Senya's kind of fallen out of the fray of being the rank 1 like Harsetti counter with the likes of New Kid Aiden, hurting that draft really hard, as well as being just a better Harsetti counter, as well as the problem with injury kind of being abundant in the current meta, where Alencia starts to fall off really quick. Lua has had a resurgence recently, but overall she's not that great of a unit to have as like your one of your main picks. But she's still going to be strong if the enemy doesn't have answers to her, which a lot of her answers aren't really being picked in the meta. So there's been a lot of times where she kind of just beats the opponent really easily because they're not ready for the pivot into blue Lua. Elagos last season was the king of cleave. He's still really strong, but there's stronger cleave units at the moment with the likes of Fire Litica being a better defense breaker as well as pushbacker, and with Fire Flan kind of not being that big of a problem due to Fire Litica being a better counter, but he's still really nice and he is going to be a good like backup DPS opener in place of Fire Litica when she's banned. And we have Melissa, who she is a strong unit if you're able to get a turn with her and you're playing into a slower opponent. But like last season, she's seen a lot of play with certain players like Korean Jesus. But I don't think this season she's way harder to pick, and you mainly only will play her if you really enjoy her as a character. We have Kisei with the insurgence of Ahmed, was a really strong DPS to just kind of wipe out teams. But as people are getting used to playing into Ahmed, Ahmed is not really the go-to cleave unit, but she's still a solid cleave unit. And when your opponent doesn't exactly play into her perfectly, like Kisei will always be a good pick whenever you have band protection Ahmed. So I think this is a fine pickup if you just want to have a DPS and you really like playing Ahmed and you have a really well built Ahmed to climb. And then I have Elvira here only because her mechanic is very unique where she fully counters Fighting Spirit. So she's going to be really strong in Guild War when fighting into Young Senyas, fighting AU Fiends. Like, you can play her into Successor Teiyu in RTA, Benimaru in RTA. Really just a solid unit to have, but she's not mandatory. She's more of like a niche 4-5 pick into someone who picks a Fighting Spirit unit early. And then, kind of like units that if you really like these units and you have the gear to make them work, there's no reason not to grab them. And like on the top of the list is Abigail. I think Abigail is really solid, and if you have enough imprints for her to be tripled S to get the crit chance increase, she could be a really decent Harsetti like DPS, Harsetti game DPS, as well as be able to protect your backline unit. So she is going to be very useful in those niche scenarios where you're playing into Harsetti and you don't want your backline unit to just get popped like a balloon. Fumir isn't really that meta of a unit, but she has seen a lot of play as being a unit that can be really strong when you build your account around her, and you can easily like hit the higher levels of play spamming her. But like, it's really gear intensive in my opinion, and unit intensive because she needs to have 2 green and 2 red units if you're going to play her band protection to reliably get her off. And if you're playing her 4-5, usually you play her with DDR to have DDR force span. And like you need like red units and green units that are really good in the meta. Like Celine and Veronica used to be the go-to green red early. Fire Shuri is really strong. Some people pick Knockwall, but that's like overall it. She's just really fun unit, but really hard to play. But if you want to play her, like there's no reason not to, because she's playable to hit the higher levels. Schneel kind of helps beat DDR players because Death Dealer Ray is basically unplayable when playing into Schneel, and you need your other 3 units on your team to be able to deal with Schneel. But that's really easy once you get to higher brackets of play. But if you're playing against players who don't understand that you need to rush down Schneel with pure damage, and they let the long game kind of like pan out, where DDR is just a sitting duck, it's basically like you're playing a unit up, and he will be really strong for when that happens, which happens pretty often until you hit like the likes of Emperor, in my opinion. And then Ludwig, I think he's really strong with um Ahmed Cleave, but honestly, like he's really hard to be a good DPS compared to Kisei, especially because um like Kisei, she gets a built-in pen 60% during stealth, and stealth lets her like live long. While Ludwig, like you can go time matter full damage and keep your invincibility, but once you lose that invincibility, you're basically dead, and you can be targeted by CC. So like, he just has a harder time to like survive after the initial burst compared to Kisei, because she's unable to be targeted, has a big barrier, so the AoEs will not let her be single targeted even after, unless they have enough damage or buff dispel. But I think like outside of these units, the kind of last tier would just be playing to or pulling for imprints, the imprint characters and moonlight units that you really want, like Empyrean Ilanov really likes imprints. Go for imprints on your Aria. Go for imprints on Peyra. Like imprints will always be good, but with the awakened plus 15 ones, I would recommend any of these units because you're not going to use the awakened plus 15 units as imprints really. So it's better to just get a bonus unit. And like having two Politices always good. If you don't have Elvir, get Elvir. And even if you have the unit, you can always get the plus 15 one and then use the unit that you already have that you put no investment into as the imprint. But that's basically it. I don't think there's much more to say. Like all the other rewards are pretty straightforward. You claim them and you just use them. Like the pools, you use them. The equipment, you just roll it, and that's about it.